this freaking post. So anyone that's been in the Pokemon community for a while has probably seen this on every kind of social media, because it's a really fun question. Which Pokemon came first? Now, I was on Twitter recently, it popped in my Twitter feed, and I realized I haven't seen this picture in a very long time. I almost welcomed it back into my life like an old friend, but also that friend's kind of a jerk, which is why I haven't been giving it too much attention recently, but mostly because it's just a trick question. That's what the fun is about, you know? Bulbasaur, Mew, Rhydon, and Arceus, they're all technically firsts in Pokemon for some reason. That's where the fun comes in, you know? You share it with all your friends, like, alright guys, which one do you think came first? You throw it in the Skype group. That's what I did. Naturally, there was disagreement. And then I wanted to make a video to really take this to the next level and beyond. So each of these Pokemon has a reason as to why they're first, and I want to ask the question, which Pokemon really came first? And in the description, or in the description of this video, you will find a straw poll link. In that straw poll, you will find these 4 answers. Now, if you guys don't know each individual reason as to why these Pokemon on the list, like you're thinking, why is Rhydon on here? Why does Mew? You know, Arceus makes sense, but why Bulbasaur? Something like that. If you have any questions, please watch the video all the way through. Leave a like. Also, comment down below if you think you have a different reasoning as to why this Pokemon should be on the list than the one I give in the video. Now, I'm not going to put my opinion, or I'm not going to be like, this is the Pokemon I think is the first Pokemon, because then I don't want to poison the well. I don't want people to have their opinions change about me. I want to see what the community thinks after having the information presented to them, and we'll just see where this goes. I don't think anyone has really tried this with this question. They just try to answer it for themselves, so it could be really, really fun. So first off, we have Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur is on this list for a pretty simple reason. It's the first Pokemon you encounter in the first Pokedex. It's number 1. It's Pokemon number 1. So, is that really it? Is that all there is to Bulbasaur? Yeah. Now, I do want to throw in a side little fun fact of trivia here, that when it comes to all starter Pokemon, for any trivia, if you want to know the order of them, like, oh man, is Charizard after Blastoise or before or something like that, all you have to do is remember that Bulbasaur's first Pokemon, so grass. Fire beats grass, water beats fire, and now you have your evolutionary lines and stuff, and you can remember that for all of the starters. So, fun little stuff right there, but yeah, it's all about the National Pokedex. That National Pokedex, Bulbasaur number 1, and that's kind of how the list works. That it's the first, quote-unquote, what is the first Pokemon in a list, and that's Bulbasaur. But I will admit, the list is pretty vague. I mean, you want to go by the Pokerap? Electrode's the first Pokemon in the Pokerap. When I was a kid, I thought that was like the super hidden trivia. I was like, yo guys, look how simple, like all my friends in like kindergarten and stuff, I was like, yo guys, look how simple Electrode looks. You know, maybe that Pokemon was the first one, because it's first in the Pokerap, so it's first one listed off. Now, another Pokemon I might add to the straw poll, or at least tease a bit in this video, is Victini, because Victini is the only Pokemon with a regional Pokedex number of 000. Now, if we treat the entirety of Pokemon as canon, as in all of these Pokemon already existed before, and they weren't like super newly discovered because these regions, these people, these cultures already existed in the Pokemon universe, well then wouldn't that put Victini ahead of Bulbasaur? Because even though it's number 1 in the National Dex, its regional dex number is only number 1, so it's no different than any other grass starter in any other region except for Victini. Victini's regional dex, even though it's in the 5th generation, is 000. So its listing technically comes before Bulbasaur, and it's the only 000 Pokemon. So that's what we're going to have for first right there, and that's the obvious one about Bulbasaur. But what about when we look at Arceus, Mew, and Rhydon? One of these Pokemon is not like the other. What's Rhydon doing on this list? Well, here's where all of like the super trivia nuts come into play, because Rhydon is the first Pokemon ever created by Game Freak, and that's kind of what we're looking at right here, because this is a list of Pokemon by index number, which means that these were like the first Pokemon index, that Game Freak, when they scribbled down character concepts and stuff, it was Rhydon, Kangaskhan, Nidoran, Clefairy, Spearow, then Voltorb. So Rhydon kind of has it as the first Pokemon ever made as a Pokemon, even going back to when Pokemon was Capsulemon. So right here we have like a lot of the earliest concept art just filled with Rhydon, or a Rhyhorn looking spiky rocky kind of dude, and that's kind of like where the beginning of Pokemon started. Also, there's an interview with Ken Sugimori, and he talks about, yeah, Rhydon is the first Pokemon that was designed. Now this was off the Bulbapedia that it was translated and stuff like that, so I don't read Japanese. I couldn't find like a translated text article of it. But yeah, it's in there somewhere, official spoken word, that Rhydon is the first Pokemon. So now Rhydon is the answer for the first quote-unquote Pokemon. Like, first Pokemon ever created. So you would naturally think that that is the first Pokemon. End of story. And I think that's where it kind of shows, like, for the personality test, you know. If you think that linearly, that could be a thing. But what about Arceus? That Arceus is seen as like the god of Pokemon, that it created the universe, it has done all kinds of crazy things. And that's what the community has kind of made out of Arceus' lore, that it is told in mythology this Pokemon was born before the universe even existed. So if nothing else existed before Arceus, then doesn't that make it the first by a lot? Like, that has to be the first Pokemon. And then we get into some other things, you know, described in mythology as the Pokemon that shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. And all the Pokedex entries are something like this, you know, it was hatched from an egg that existed before the universe. It shaped the world, it shaped the universe, has 1,000 arms, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. But I think the key word here is mythology. That if we look at Greek mythology, you kind of have to take all those stories with a grain of salt. You can't really take these things literally, especially when it's this much anecdotal evidence. You know, maybe just the people of the Sinnoh region are that proud of themselves that's like, yeah, well, our super amazing legendary Pokemon shaped the universe. What do you got? Kind of idea. So that's kind of where it goes into interpretation, you know. What if this Pokemon is real, though? What if it's legit? What if it did shape the universe? Then are you going to view that as the first Pokemon? But then we start getting to, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg scenario, because of Mew, or at least something that contradicts directly, because Mew, its DNA is said to contain the genetic codes of all Pokemon, so it can use all kinds of techniques. Because it can learn any move, some people began research to see if it is the ancestor of all Pokemon, and that's where Mew comes into play, that a lot of people, or at least, like, you know, scientists and the whole Pokemon lore, is fairly convinced that Mew is the ancestor of all Pokemon, that its DNA can do this, and that there's a lot of reasons as to why people believe this about Mew. But again, is it the scientific research that's trying to discover this that is proving Mew to be the ancestor of all Pokemon? Or is it just, again, kind of like anecdotal evidence or people making assumptions about the Pokemon that may or may not be true? And that's where the whole Arceus-Mew debate comes into play. How can Arceus exist before Mew if Mew contains its DNA? And also, did all Pokemon come from Mew because Mew contains the DNA of it? Or is this just some kind of really crazy evolutionary thing that happened? And also, these Pokemon have some extra things going for them. Like, Arceus is powerful enough to create a Pokemon. There's nothing else in the Pokemon world that just can spawn a legendary Pokemon nonetheless. That we see this in Heart Gold, Soul Silver through the Arceus events in the Sinnoh ruins. Oh yeah, you want a Giratina, a Palkia, or Dialga egg at level 1? Well, yeah, Arceus can create that. So it kind of supports the Arceus lore, you know, if it can create space, time, or a Pokemon that rules over an alternate dimension. Now, while that may sound hard to beat, Mew is the only Pokemon besides Ditto to get transformed. Now, I think we can technically exclude Ditto because it is a bit of an anomaly, but Mew has transformed, and the only reason that this makes sense is because, hey, it should have the genetics of all Pokemon, that it has the characteristics, that it has the adaptability that can only exist from an ancestor of some sort, so it can transform into any Pokemon, including Arceus. Now, it doesn't gain the direct powers of that Pokemon, but it can still show that it has some kind of genetic makeup or some kind of instability that allows it to do such things. So that's where it comes into, you know, are we going to trust the mythology? Are we going to just kind of look at it very literally? How is this going to work? And that's why I want you guys to answer that straw poll and really figure this one out. Share it with your friends, try to get the information across. I think it's a really fun bit of trivia, you know, which Pokemon came first? Bulbasaur, the #1 index Pokemon. Victini, the #0 index Pokemon from a later region. We also have Rhydon, the Pokemon that was created first. I mean, is that it? GG? You look at the developers, you look at this entire world that they created, and are you going to take it as Rhydon? Or inside of the Pokemon world, is that what we're looking at? Arceus, the Pokemon that existed before anything and shaped the universe, shaped the world, can create space and time at will. Or Mew, which somehow had to exist beforehand because it has Arceus' DNA inside of it. I think it's a really fun thing. Also really silly, maybe worth a video for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.